Hi, AP World History students. So today, I don't want to use up a lot of your time, but I want to talk to us about something important that's going to shape our experience for the last month or so of class here as we get ramped up not only for Thursday's exam, but for the national exam. And what that is talking about what this modified DBQ will look like, and specifically talk about how it's going to be graded. All right. The College Board has adjusted the rubric slightly. I don't think that the experience of writing the essay will be very different at all. They're just kind of changing how the points work a little bit, and I'm going to walk you through that process right now. And before we begin, I just want to assure you that having thought about this and analyzed it and talked about it with some other AP World History teachers, I'm very confident that these changes are to our advantage. All right, so I'm going to show you my own kind of graphic way of thinking about this, and then I'll show you an actual rubric of how I'll be scoring this and what it will look like. So what we're looking at here is like a graphic way of looking at the old rubric, the rubric that we've been used to all year long. All right, so you can get between 1 and 7 points, right? So these steps here sort of show you all the points that you can get. And the last one is this doozy, this so-called complexity point. AP World History teachers tend to call it the unicorn point because it's not given very often, but it's for the very, very, very shiniest, best work that demonstrates all kinds of complexity. But otherwise, as we're thinking it through, right, like we have our contextualization point. We normally start there. And then we've got a thesis point, and we know what those two pieces are, right? The contextualization, we're stepping back and we're describing a broader process that leads us into the prompt topic. The thesis is our response that reflects our groupings. Then we have probably the simplest point in the old rubric, which is just describe 3 documents, right? You're giving some details from 3 of the documents. I don't think I've scored a DBQ from any of you this year that didn't get that point. That's very simple to get. Much harder to get is use 6 out of the 7 documents to support your argument, right? You're not just describing them, you're actually supporting the argument that you're making along the way. We've gotten pretty good at that, students. This is one area where we're feeling a lot of confidence. Provide 1 outside evidence. This is a challenge, but it's a good challenge, right? It's like bring in 1 piece of outside information that you can set on the table and say, this also supports my arguments or qualifies or adds some contour or explains my argument a little bit more. Then there is the sourcing point, right? You can source 3 documents. So you're given, in the old DBQ, we're given 7 documents, and can you source 3 of them correctly? Can you sort of explain how the author's point of view or the historical situation or who they're speaking to or what their purpose is in saying this, how that shapes the content of the document and what's going on there, right? That's the old one. That's what we're used to. Here's the new one. 10 points. But before the 10 points freaks you out, I just want you to know that the height, the difficulty, the height of these steps is the same between the two. I'm flipping back and forth between the two, right? We're going the same height up here. It's the same level of difficulty, but it's just sort of like the steps are a little smaller, right? And what this is if you can imagine, guys, 250,000, just to pick a number, it could be 300,000, but imagine 250,000 people taking this exam. And under the old rubric, right, there's just these sort of like 7 places that they would sort of have the students spaced out in, right? That's like the 7 possible scores. The College Board really wanted to be able to differentiate more between students who did poorly and marginally and okay and fairly solid and really solid and extraordinary, right? They really wanted to be able to differentiate that more. And so they took the same stuff that we were doing before and just added more kind of granularity to it. It's a finer tooth comb that they're going over this. And they're doing this to help you, students. And I think the stuff that we're going to see is like, these are all very, very doable for us. And it's all very similar, okay? So like, there's a couple steps in here that are kind of newer pieces added in, all right? Context, thesis, that's the same. Describe 2 of the documents, right, out of 5 now. Remember, we're only doing 5 for Thursday's exam and for the national exam. So describe 2 out of the 5, easy piece of cake. You guys should put that one in your back pocket already. Use 2 out of the 5 documents to support an argument. Use 4 out of the 5 documents to support an argument. So this one right here is really similar to what we already had. This is like a new point. And you can totally hit this, students. That's like taking another point and putting it in your back pocket. Can I use two of them and just support some argument that I'm making? All right. So they added in a new layer of granularity here. Here's the biggest new piece. Provide one outside evidence. We're used to that. And the College Board says, how about you provide a second outside evidence? Now here, their thinking is there is no multiple choice portion of this exam. There is no LEQ. All right. And so as a way of saying, well, what else is in your heads? Besides these 5 documents, the College Board wants to know what else is in your heads. What else can you bring to the table? So this is why it's like, we need to be studying all this content, knowledge, information, because there's now 2 points available for outside evidence. And especially for those of you students who are like, I want a 4 or 5, then you need to be thinking, I'm gunning for 2 pieces of outside evidence. And this is very doable. All right. The sourcing, they kind of did the same thing as they did with the using documents to support the evidence. They kind of added in like a marginal point and then an extra point. So can you source 1 out of the 5 documents correctly? Just 1. If you can only source 1 out of the 5 correctly, they'll give you a point. If you can source 2 out of the 5 correctly, they'll give you 2 points. Right? That's beautiful. And then again, the unicorn point, the complexity point. That's a high step there at the end. Let's look at this in a more traditional visual here, right? Like this is just the rubric that I'll actually use to grade, right? And that college we've sort of designed with other AP World History students or World History teachers. The thesis point, again, making a specific historically defensible claim that responds to all parts of the question. You're showing some line of reasoning. You're talking about continuities or changes or comparison or causation, whatever the prompt is asking you to do. This just means you really understand the prompt, you've looked at it carefully, and you are building an argument the correct way. All right. And your thesis tells me what your groupings will be. All right. Some people responded to this way, and other people responded to it that way. Or one major change was X and another major change was Y. But some things stayed the same. Maybe there's a third grouping. Probably not a third grouping with only 5 documents. That seems really hard to me. But anyway, we'll talk more about that later. All right, so your thesis point, that's totally the same. Context point, totally the same. The big picture of where the prompt sits. Make sure you use specific evidence from that time period or topic and then connect it to the topic of the essay. Using the documents. All right, if you can use 2 documents, then you get a point. Beautiful. All right. Use 2 documents to support your argument. You're not just sort of describing it. It's like I'm taking something from this document, I'm describing it and pointing to how it supports my thesis argument, right? And you guys are already doing this. Please, this is nothing new. You're already doing this. If you can just use 2 of the documents there, that's great. I personally think, guys, that these 2 points are the easiest 2 points. And if you're someone that already feels some confidence with thesis and context, then it's like you can start saying, all right, hey, I'm really racking up points here. All right. Supporting the argument with 4 of the documents. To me, this is just a matter of if you read carefully and you understand 4 out of the 5 documents, then you're doing this, right? And you've grouped them and you're saying, okay, here's what I'm going to say. I'm going to argue this, right? And here we go. Outside evidence. All right. Use 1 specific piece of outside evidence and connect it to the argument, not just the topic. It's not enough to be, the topic has something to do with World War I, so I'm going to say, and Franz Ferdinand got killed. Did you know that? It's like, no, you have to be like connecting it to the actual argument you're making. It's not just sort of like in the broader subject. All right. And then a second piece of evidence. And again, this is because you guys are only being asked to do a DBQ. And the College Board says, what else is in your brains? We want you to dump out anything else you got in your brains here in this 45 minutes. Sourcing. Again, it's a chance for you to prove I'm an advanced sourcing scholar, or I am a moderate sourcing scholar, or I have no idea what I'm doing and I haven't been trying hard enough at this all year. so like you can get the 1 sourcing point for just sourcing 1 document correctly, you can get that 1 point. If you can source 2 out of the 5 correctly, you get that 2 points, right? So I'm going to coach us that, again, if you get a chart, don't bother sourcing it. It tends to be impossible, all right? So let's say there are 4 text documents. I would say try some of that sourcing cheat sheet language. Just try that on all 4. Why not, right? And then the complexity point where it's like you are demonstrating, not only do I understand this topic, like innately. I can play jazz with this argument, and I can talk about how it's complicated and it's nuanced and that's going on, but also this, and I can like really break things into subtle gradients, and I can compare carefully the subtle differences between the documents. And I can talk about conflicting evidence that also comes in and makes this more complicated. It's hard to get. A few of you have gotten it through the course of this year. I tend to be kind of a lenient. I give away more of these than the College Board does, but it's out there, and that's where the College Board is trying to find that top 1 or 2%. That's our new rubric. All right. To go back to this old rubric, 7 steps. You guys are already used to playing all over this like it's a jungle gym. All right. And you're good at that. New rubric, the jungle gym is the same height. All right. There's just more places for us to fit on this. All right. And more distribution for the College Board to take those 250,000 students. And students, a lot of you need to be looking at this and saying, hey, I don't need to. I'm going to say I belong somewhere between 5 and 10 here. Like I belong up here, and certainly where people are passing this thing, that's where you guys belong. So that's my introduction to this rubric. We will talk more tomorrow, and we're definitely going to talk more about practically speaking, how do you do this? But that is the rubric. I'll give you a chance to respond and say what you think. But here we go. We can do this, guys. Stay strong. We can do it.